Welcome back to another FPL free hit team video and podcast, this time out of Double Gameweek 34, and remember there are 6 teams doubling, including Arsenal, Bournemouth, Wolves, Crystal Palace, Everton and Liverpool. I'll highlight the best options from all of those teams, but also some single gameweek players who can do a great job in Double Gameweek 34, and this team will be affordable to everyone watching because we're going to get rid of some big premium assets, which opens up a lot of funds to improve this team and go for the best differentials and players for this game week. Smash the like button and subscribe for new. We reached 23,000 subscribers during the deadline stream yesterday for UCL Fantasy, so thank you to those that have supported the channel. It's greatly appreciated as always. All the super chatters, patrons and channel members go a long way to keeping the content going, and check out all the other links in the description below, such as my Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM. Also join the FPL League, the Discord server, check out Draft Town, and also Spotify and Amazon Music. Leave a 5-star review on those podcasts. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. My squad value is 104.9 million, so this team will be affordable to the vast majority of people, if not everyone watching, and I will suggest some alternatives and possible downgrades as we go along, but I don't think that'll be completely necessary. You should be able to afford this 50-man squad on the free hit, and of course it's all about the starting 11 with this chip. It's not like the wild card where some bench players are very useful for future game weeks, but I would always recommend, even with this chip, to have one decent bench option just in case, because rotation, surprising injuries and stuff like that can always play a part. But it's ultimately about spending the money in your starting 11, and some of the players on the bench will be very good and you might want to downgrade them to prevent bench points. That's completely up to you, but I always prefer having that squad depth if necessary. But let's now start off with the goalkeepers. There are 2 standout goalkeepers for this double, either David Raya or Alisson, and I'd rather go for the Spaniard. I bought him in for the first time in Game Week 33 as Arsenal lost 2-0 at home to Aston Villa. They were very shaky in the second half. It was a completely flat performance, but in this calendar year they have 9 wins, 1 draw and only 1 defeat in the league. It's a very impressive record, but you might have that sensation of Arsenal season tailing off. After that first leg performance against Bayern Munich, a lot of cracks were starting to show, and that followed through to the Aston Villa game where they failed to convert their chances in the first half and were punished. Aston Villa were the better team in the second, but David Raya is still the best goalkeeper for me for Double Gameweek 34, and Arsenal have the best defence in the Premier League, but they need to get their act together. If they lose to Bayern Munich tonight, this video is being recorded on the Wednesday, that could derail Arsenal's season completely, and maybe it would be worth going for some alternatives in all of these positions and not tripling up on the Gunners. But currently I am going to recommend going for 3 Arsenal players in Double Gameweek 34, and David Raya is the best goalkeeper for this game week. Now, as the backup goalkeeper, some of you might disagree. I'm going for a single game week option at home to Sheffield United, and that's going to be Onana. But if you are looking for another double game week goalkeeper, you've got plenty to choose from. Jose Sarr, Neto from Bournemouth, and you've also got a few others like Pickford and Alisson himself. I think Alisson will be the best of the lot, but I'd rather go for 3 outfield Liverpool players, and you'll start to see why with their attacking potential. But Raya and Onana are 2 of the best goalkeepers for this game week. Onana would sit on your bench, of course, but a clean sheet is certainly possible against Sheffield United at home. I highlighted Trent Alexander-Arnold during the Transtips video and podcast yesterday and talked about skipping him, and I still stand by what I said, but one update that has changed things quite drastically for Double Gameweek 34 is the injury to Connor Bradley, who will miss the next 3 weeks due to an ankle injury. So Trent has a good chance of starting both games now in 34. So if you're wildcarding in Game Week 35, you want a defender to buy for a single game week only, then Trent is probably the best one you can buy due to the sheer attacking potential and bonus points he can accumulate. And for the free hit, I would argue is the best defender alongside the likes of Ben White, Gabriel or Saliba. I think those are the best defenders on paper, but there is no guarantee that Trent starts both games anyway, because Joe Gomez could still play as a right back in one of those matches, and Trent has just returned from an injury, and the last thing Liverpool need is another injury to one position where they're quite short in. Trent has just come back, Connor Bradley is now injured, and Liverpool need everyone they can to get over the line in the title race. But Trent Alexander-Arnold for me is now a great option for Double Gameweek 34, but I still wouldn't recommend him for the long term, and that includes Gameweek 35 against West Ham away. Now, the second defender I'm going to go for is quite a simple one. He's going to sit on your bench, and I'll talk about the starting 11 and the captaincy later on using FPL.team. But I would go for Zabani as your Bournemouth defensive coverage, but he wouldn't be anywhere near the starting 11. He's got a double game week against Aston Villa and Wolves. I don't expect a clean sheet in either game, but Zabani has been quite good in FPL recently with some decent returns, getting bonus points along the way, and also his first ever goal, which he got in Double Game Week 28. So maybe this could be his time to shine yet again. But we've got 3 defender slots left, and I'm going to go for a relative differential compared to the other kind of template Arsenal picks. I'm going to go for Ben White. He's got really good form in 2024, especially since that trip to Dubai, where Arsenal have been on a roll. Of course, in the last week, things have derailed a little bit, but they could get back on track, and maybe that match against Bayern Munich will be pivotal in deciding whether Arsenal go the distance in the Champions League, but also in the Premier League title race. And I do prefer Ben White over Gabriel or Saliba for a single game week punt. In the long term, I always recommend Gabriel because he's cheaper, but that's really what it comes down to. Apart from that, there's not much to separate all 3 of them, but White has more attacking potential in recent weeks. He even got an assist against Bayern Munich in the first leg, and it seems like he just manages to find a way to get points on the board, whether it's a goal, an assist, bonus points, or clean sheets. But there are 2 defender slots left. They're budget options, and one of them is Munoz to cover that Crystal Palace defensive line, which kept the clean sheet at Anfield of all places. But you could also go for Dean Henderson in goal to cover that defence in general. I just look at both fixtures and I fancy it from an attacking perspective, but not so much defensively, and that's why I'm not too keen on Munoz Henderson to start in your Game Week 34 team, but it's something worth considering, especially if you want to go for some differentials and climb up the ranks for the remaining game weeks of the season. And finally, I'm going to go for the first injury out of this team, and the only one we have at this moment in time, and that's going to be Ait-Nouri. We don't know enough about the injury, but he was very close to making the squad in Game Week 33. And prior to that match, Gary O'Neill said that he envisages Ait-Nouri being part of the squad, and he kind of hinted at Ait-Nouri potentially starting the game, but he wasn't even on the bench, and that causes some concern. But I think he's one of the best options in the defence for Double Game Week 34 due to his attacking potential, his incredible form, and he's recently been playing as a left winger. He's playing so advanced. That might change with the likes of Hwang Hee-chan returning from injury, probably in Double Game Week 34. You've also got Cunha, who scored a brace against Nottingham Forest in Game Week 33, but I still think Ait-Nouri is either the first or second best Wolves asset in the game at this moment in time. Saka was in incredible form around February to March, and it has dropped slightly, especially in terms of goal output, but I still back him in Double Game Week 34. And if you were to keep any Arsenal player, particularly in the offensive line, until the end of the season, Saka's the one I'd always recommend. But if you want to go for some differentials, I think Havertz or Odegaard could be the play. Even a Martinelli could surprise people. But if I were to go for any other Arsenal midfielder, it would be Martin Odegaard. I think the Wolves and Chelsea fixtures suit him. He was subbed off due to an injury against Aston Villa, but he was the only good Arsenal player throughout the match, and he's been incredible in 2024. And perhaps since December, I haven't even been able to point out one bad Martin Odegaard performance. He sometimes has a great game and doesn't get the goals or assists, and he is robbed of so many assists, by the way. The attacking line has really let Odegaard down, but he was in training ahead of that Bayern Munich game on the Tuesday. He'll most likely start on the Wednesday against Bayern Munich, and we'll see later tonight. But Odegaard will be my top tip as an Arsenal differential in the heart of that midfield. I am going for Saka though, and 2 Arsenal defenders, at least Raya in goal and Ben White in the heart of that defensive line. Next up, it's a very simple one. Mohamed Salah is still essential for me on the free hit for Double Game Week 34. He's been very underwhelming, in fact, in the last couple of weeks, particularly since his return from injury, but I still think he's going to do a great job. He's the best captaincy option on paper. And it'll be no surprise to see Salah as the most popular captaincy option, with Saka in second, and a huge gap between him and third place in terms of effective ownership and the amount of people who captain him in Double Game Week 34. The third midfielder is Luis Diaz. His form in general is very good. He's scoring or assisting in virtually every game since February. And like all Liverpool players against Crystal Palace, he was quite poor, but that was kind of a one-off. I would back Liverpool to bounce back from a very poor week for them, and it all started with that loss against Atalanta. There were some warning signs against Sheffield United. They fell behind once again in a Premier League game, and you can't keep doing that and go on to win the title. But you never know. There are still some twists and turns left in this title race, although Man City will be the overwhelming favourites to lift the title again. Now, there are 2 midfielder slots left, and I'm very tempted by some differentials, but there is one player who has a single game week, and I'd back him to do very well in Double Gameweek 34, and that's going to be Phil Foden. He has a great record at the Amex Stadium and against Brighton overall, and if I were to pick any single game week midfielder for Gameweek 34, it would undoubtedly be Phil Foden. Now, you could argue he's a rotation risk. If he starts against Real Madrid, which he almost certainly will he start the weekend? I still think he will, but in the long run, there could be the odd game here and there where Foden is rested and Man City can still get the job done whilst resting some key players like Phil Foden. And finally, to complete this team, it's going to be none other than Eze, who scored and got 10 points at Anfield, and right now he's probably the best differential to go for. But will he be a differential by the Gameweek 34 deadline? Probably not, but he's still one of the best options on the free hit. And if you wanted to go even more differential, I'd recommend Elise, as I'll show you very soon, but his minutes are always a concern. He can't seem to stay fit this season and also over the course of his Crystal Palace career. But if you were to go for a massive differential in the midfield, I think going for Odegaard instead of Saka could be one of them, and also maybe going for Elise instead of Phil Foden. But all of these kind of variants I'll show you very soon using FPL.team. But before we get to that, let's complete this squad with the 3 forwards. I'm going for 3 budget options in this position, including Solanke, who technically is mid-price to be fair. He got 7 points against Manchester United in that 2-2 draw, and Solanke has been consistent all season, although in the last couple of games he has blanked more often than not, but I still back him for this double. And the fixtures don't look particularly great, but I would back Solanke to score at least 1 goal in both games, and he can also get the odd assist, and most importantly, he's always a threat with the great underlying numbers. He's also on penalties, which massively helps as well. But the next one is another massive differential, and in my opinion, he will stay a differential until the deadline, and that's Matheus Cunha, who I was very close to buying before the Burnley game, but because he was just returning from an injury and he ended up not starting that game, that was enough to put me off, and instead I went for Manice, and I kind of wish I just went for Cunha in the end, but ultimately that could be a blessing in disguise in other areas, as I'll discuss in the team selection video and podcast. But I really back Cunha to be the best Wolves asset in this double. He has scored against Arsenal and Bournemouth in the reverse fixtures earlier this season, and he's been so consistent as well. Injuries have hampered him a little bit recently, but he's now back on track. He scored that brace against Nottingham Forest, and he's arguably the best forward in Gameweek 34, although I'd probably give the edge to Solanke due to the sheer consistency and availability that he has shown this season. And finally, I'm going for another Crystal Palace attacker in Mateta, who's been very consistent recently, but he missed 2 big chances against Liverpool. Is that a sign of things to come? Perhaps it is, but against West Ham and Newcastle at home, I think Crystal Palace could score 2 goals each in both of those games, and going for a double up in Crystal Palace offensively could be the play. And some of you might even consider tripling up with Elise on top of Mateta and Eze. If you want to go for that, be sure to let me know down in the comment section below. It's something that I would consider if you are free hitting, and even with normal transfers before wildcarding in Gameweek 35. And currently Eze is the top of my own shortlist, but I'm also quite flexible in terms of the players I want to buy. But I have to say Cunha is really catching my eye in the forward line despite that Arsenal fixture, and this 50-man squad offers you plenty of differentials, a high ceiling and a lot of doublers in the process. Between the sticks, I'd go for David Raya away to Wolves and at home to Chelsea, and double up on the Gunners defensively with Ben White. The main differential in this defensive line will be Trent Alexander-Arnold away to Fulham and Everton. 8 Nuri would complete this defence with Arsenal and Bournemouth at home. Then we move on to the 4 midfielders starting in Luis Diaz and Salah for that Liverpool triple up, and also 2 attacking players. Saka and Eze finish this midfield, with Eze having 2 home games against West Ham and Newcastle, and that's why I'm doubling up on Crystal Palace offensively with Mateta, with those same fixtures of course. Solanke is away to Aston Villa and Wolves, and Cunha completes his starting 11, and that's a very solid one according to FPL.team. 112.6 expected points. I've got Onana, Foden, Munoz and Zabani on the bench, but I also want to show you some different picks you can go for. So instead of Trent, if you're really not sure about him starting both games, you can go for Virgil van Dijk instead. And also I've gone for Pickford instead of Onana, but you can pick any goalkeeper, maybe Dean Henderson, Jose Sarr, or Neto. It's completely up to you. And after Everton's performance against Chelsea the other night, you probably don't want to go for any Everton asset right now, but I still think Pickford is their best option. Then you've got the likes of Mikolenko, Tarkovsky in the backline, and also Branthwaite as an enabler. And I've also gone for the likes of Dalot as a single gaming defender at home to Sheffield United, and a few other changes include Watkins in this forward line. But as you can see in the starting 11, the main difference apart from Virgil van Dijk in for Trent is going for Elise and doubling up on that Crystal Palace midfield. And you could even sell Watkins, for example, and go for Mateta, but you have to bench one of these double game week players like Cunha, Solanke, maybe someone else entirely. But tripling up on Crystal Palace could be the play. If you're asking me, I probably wouldn't. I'd stick to 2. And my favourite at the moment is going for Eze and Mateta. But I wouldn't discount Elise, who is averaging so many points per match this season. He's got such a high ceiling, and before his injury he was in incredible form, perhaps the most informed FPL asset at the time, so he could certainly be a really big differential with a massive ceiling in Double Gameweek 34. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Let's try to get this video to the 200 likes, and let's keep on pushing towards 25,000 subscribers and beyond. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the other links in the description below for the Patreon, Championship Discord server, the FPL League, Draft Town, and Spotify and Amazon Music. Leave a 5-star review on those podcasts. It goes a long way to supporting the channel. I wish you all the best of luck for Double Gameweek 34 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.